I'm going to be talking about one of the other pillars of legal reform in Japan, law school education, and one of the other pillars of legal reform, which is dramatic changes to the legal profession. My experience is based as a professor at one of these pillars at the Japanese law school, almost since the system started. More recently, I was on a government research panel that is evaluating the law school policy so far. Anyways, the story so far, and I don't actually really like this graphic, but because it's sort of, what I really want is a graphic showing a very small number for Japan, but since it was in The Economist, it's kind of topical. But this shows the population to lawyer ratio for Japan, and we're talking about conviction ratios. Some people believe there's actually a connection between the absence of people to defend criminal defendants and the high conviction rate. But as you can see, Japan has a very high population to lawyer ratio, or to put it another way, a very small number of lawyers for a population of about 125 million. So if we look at, this is a little easier to read. So right now we have 26,803 lawyers, according to the most recent data from the Japan Federation of Bar Associations. I think it's one of the interesting things to note is that there is an increase, a gradual increase in the number, but the more dramatic increases in the number of women attorneys. This is another graph, which I think more dramatically shows the increase. 2009, it's a very, very sharp upward spike in the population of lawyers. Now, even with this increase, I think this is an interesting comparison. Kyoto Prefecture, Kyoto is a city and a prefecture, but each prefecture in Japan typically has one bar association. The Kyoto Prefectural Bar Association has 496 lawyers for a population of 2.6 million. The smallest population the smallest prefecture by population and number of lawyers is Shimane Prefecture, which has 53 lawyers in its bar association. And if you compare that to British Columbia, there's an order of magnitude difference, several orders of magnitude in the number of registered attorneys. Furthermore, according to the JFBA, the Japan Federation of Bar Associations, almost all of Japan's attorneys are in one place or a very small number of cities. Most lawyers are in Tokyo, and if you add the other major Japanese cities, 75% of the lawyers are in large urban areas, which means that people in the countryside, in smaller towns, villages, are not being served by attorneys. Now, when we talk about law schools and the bar association, the bar exam, we're not just talking about lawyers. We're actually talking about something in Japanese called hoso. Legal professionals is the way this term is translated into English. And this is attorneys, and Japanese attorneys have when you qualify as an attorney, you get a special badge, which so you can usually identify attorneys by the badge they're wearing, a lapel badge. But also judges. They also get a lapel badge. I haven't really seen anybody wearing one. And prosecutors. Prosecutors and judges in Japan are part of a national bureaucracy. Very elite legal profession. So the legal professions in Japan consist of private attorneys and then these two types of government lawyers, legal professionals, judges, and prosecutors. Now, if we look at the number of prosecutors, even compared to the number of attorneys, the numbers are just strikingly small. Every year, there's fewer than 100 new young prosecutors appointed. I tried to find this data for the judiciary, but I couldn't find a corresponding chart. But similar figures, about 100 judges appointed, newly appointed from bar exam graduates every year. So here's another recent snapshot. The total population of legal professionals is very small. We only have 1,780 prosecutors approximately and 660 judges, though this number of judges doesn't actually count some judges. It doesn't count summary court judges and part-time judges. Now, how you became a legal professional in the old days, before the law school system, was you passed the bar exam, and the bar exam had an exceptionally low pass rate. I honestly do not know why you would ever just even think of sitting down to try and pass an exam with a 2 or 3% pass rate. Exceptionally low. So the way you became a lawyer or a judge or a prosecutor was first you were either incredibly intelligent, and I've met people who passed the bar exam at the age of 19 or 20 while they were still in college, brilliant people, or you studied really, really hard for many, many years. There were no formal requirements for sitting for the bar exam. You got a few requirements exempted if you had a certain level of educational achievement, a college degree, or so forth. But basically, anybody could sit for the bar exam. Law was primarily an undergraduate discipline. The law faculties had graduate faculties as well for aspiring academics. So if you wanted to become a law professor, you went and got your PhD in law. Bar exam preparation was conducted primarily through bar exam cram schools, which taught you how to answer bar exam questions. Once you passed the bar exam, that qualified you to enter the government-run, I say the Supreme Court of Japan's Legal Research and Training Institute for a 2-year course of study. This passing the bar exam still gets you into this institute for the course of study in 1 year. The fact that this was a government-run institute was actually a hurdle for foreign passers of the bar exam, non-Japanese passers of the bar exam, because effectively you're being paid by the government and acting as a public servant. So there was this issue of, well, how only Japanese nationals can become public servants. So they had to develop a workaround. So this is the background for the first narrative that you'll see in many discussions of the Japanese legal profession, which is that Japan is a non-litigious culture, valuing non-adversarial and informal methods of dispute resolutions. There's only a very small number of lawyers, thousands in Japan versus hundreds of thousands in the United States. Certainly, I was working in the early 1990s in a law firm in Manhattan, and at that time there were more lawyers within a 6-block radius of me than in the entire in all of Japan. When Japan was an economic powerhouse, that was one of the explanations for Japan's success was, well, Japan doesn't waste its time training lawyers, it trains engineers. In the United States trains all these millions and millions of lawyers. Part of this debate was that, well, the people who did pass, part of this narrative was that people who had passed this exceptionally hard to pass exam, the lawyers, the prosecutors, and the judges were this rarefied elite who, you couldn't just walk into their office and ask them for help. It used to be like a barrister. You had to be introduced. Somebody had to introduce you to a lawyer for you to even meet one or get them help. So Matt has kindly already talked about the Justice System Reform Council and some of the things they did. They decided that Japan's justice system needed some reform. And one of the pillars of this reform was to reform the legal profession supporting the justice system by reforming the legal profession, a profession that as a profession is rich both in quality and quantity shall be secured. I assume it reads better in the Japanese. But there's this notion that there's something wrong with some deficiencies in the legal professions. Certainly, having represented numerous foreign investors trying to do things in Japan, almost the universal complaint is about their Japanese lawyers, because there's this studying for studying for an exam where you regurgitate law really trains you to regurgitate law, so the complaint is always, well, the lawyers just regurgitate the law and then send you a bill. The clients don't really care what the law is. They want to know what they can do and what they can't do and how they can do something. They don't want to know what Article 743 of the Civil Code says and what the cases around it are. So the recommendations of the Reform Council were A, that the legal profession wasn't meeting the legal demands of society, sufficiently responding to the legal demands of society in any respect. The number of bar passers should be increased to about 3,000 per year by the year 2010. This target has not been met for reasons which I will discuss. A system of training legal professions shall not consist of a selection based upon a single point of the national bar exam. It used to be that all you had to do was pass this one very competitive exam and you were in. So the recommendation is that we not do this anymore. Rather, a system for legal training shall be established that consists of a process that organically connects legal education to the national bar exam and apprenticeship training. So I won't read it all for you, but basically this is the genesis of the law school system, graduate professional law schools, supposedly based on American law. There are a number of agendas here. To understand anything that goes on in the Japanese legal system, I think you really need to understand what the institutions involved are and what their agendas are. So an overall agenda is to have more lawyers, not just in Tokyo and Osaka and Yokohama, but everywhere throughout the countryside. The target was a legal profession to population ratio similar to France. Why France? I don't know. But that's where it comes from. More lawyers with work experience and non-law backgrounds. So traditionally, most lawyers in Japan went to undergraduate law schools and then studied for the bar exam until they passed. And really, all of their life experience consisted of studying law. Not only studying law, but studying law in order to pass a very competitive exam. This meant that studying something other than law was effectively worked against you. And it meant it was very difficult for somebody to become a lawyer after starting a job, after mid-career. I know people who've done it, but very, very difficult. So part of the goal was to become like the US or other countries where people work in a certain profession or a certain industry for a year and then go to law school and then bring that experience to the practice of law. And also to get people from other undergraduate disciplines into law so that lawyers know about engineering or science or whatever. The Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, a new player, I think, in legal education. My cynical view, their mandate was a budget. They got this whole new area of jurisdiction, a budget, and in fact, I think you can look at the law school system almost as a jurisdictional struggle between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Justice and the court system. The lawyers, the Japan Federation of Bar Association, their mandate was more lawyers in the right places, but not too much competition. And the Bar Association's agenda has always been to have a unified legal profession, i.e. a supposedly US-style system where judges and prosecutors are chosen from practicing attorneys, rather than as is the current system where people pass the bar exam, you go to this legal research training institute, and then they join the judiciary. So if you're a judge from the age of 22 or 23, and you don't actually have any practice experience. So the lawyers basically want to have a system where the judges are lawyers and subject to legal ethical rules, the same as lawyers. The universities all want to have law schools, but you have to have enough bar passers for the established universities to buy into it. So if you're the University of Tokyo, faculty of law, under the existing system, you have maybe 300 or 400 people passing the bar exam every year. So you're not going to buy into a new system of law schools that gets you fewer than that. So if you take Tokyo University 300, Waseda University 300, take the top 10 schools in terms of bar passage numbers under the old system, you already have a very large number of bar passes. So if you want to get, but at the same time, if you want to have lawyers everywhere, judges selected from lawyers, you need to have lawyers in all communities. You need to have law schools in all communities. So we're already seeing a problem forming, which is universities throughout the country want to establish law schools. The Bar Association sort of wants that because having judges chosen from the legal community assumes that there are actually people there in the community where the court is to choose from. The judiciary, I actually don't know what their agendas are. I assume they want a steady supply of young judges, just as the Ministry of Justice wants a steady supply of young prosecutors. But part of the trade-off for the new law school system is the course of training at the Legal Research and Training Institute is shortened. For a long time, for literally decades, the LRTI only had 500 slots every year. So, in order to increase to the target number of 3,000, if everybody still has to go through this institute, then there's a capacity issue which the law schools are supposed to shoulder some of the burden of. So the LRTI, the course of program, is shortened, and the law schools are supposed to take up some of the slack there. Corporate Japan was never really a leading actor in this debate, but what Corporate Japan said they wanted was, we don't want these lawyers whose primary training is in litigation. We want lawyers who can go to other countries and negotiate contracts with other, who can do business law. And the current system was really very heavily litigation focused. So, the Ministry of Justice, what they wanted was apparently a 3 strikes rule, because one of the results of this old system where the bar exam had a pass rate of 2% was the average person who passed the bar exam was 30. And spent 5 years studying. And it's too old to join a bureaucracy and spend your career in the bureaucracy, and also your mind being polluted by radical outside influences. So the Ministry of Justice really just wanted to have a steady stream of young people that they could choose bring into the bureaucracy, assuming that it was the same for the judiciary. Now, just as a sort of creepy and interesting aside, I think one of the trade-offs that the Ministry of Justice got out of agreeing to allow the Ministry of Education, and this is just speculation on my part, to have a say in legal education was the Ministry of Justice got to have a say in teaching elementary school students about law. This is from the Ministry of Justice website, where they have identified one of the most important issues for them today: training elementary students about law. Just whatever elementary school student needs. Something for somebody to look into. Anyways, as a result of these agendas in 2004, 68 law schools, subsequently 74. One has since left the playing field, or is going to leave the playing field. So now there are 73 law schools around the country supposedly teaching law in a new way. Small classes using the Socratic method, just like American law school, and not just teaching for the bar exam. Okay? Not just teaching bar exam subjects. The main bar exam subjects are constitutional law, criminal law and procedure, civil law and procedure, commercial law, administrative law. The law remains an undergraduate discipline, so there are 2-year programs for people who can demonstrate an adequate foundational knowledge of law on entry, and then 3-year programs for people who don't. So the assumption is that 4 years of undergraduate law school is equivalent to the first year of law school. The first sitting of the new bar exam was in 2006. So people who entered in 2004 and went through a 2-year program, graduated in 2006, and then sat for this new bar exam regime. All sounds very good. Trouble in paradise. The pass rate on the new bar exam started to go down. Now you're thinking, well, 48% compared to 3% under the old system, that's great. How could that possibly be a bad thing? Well, it's not, I guess. But at the same time, you have to understand now there's a very significant upfront investment in terms of time and money for anybody who wants to become a lawyer or a judge or a prosecutor. You have to spend 2 years of your life and that much in tuition on the process. If you're a law school, the trouble is that people stopped wanting to go to law school really quickly. This is the drop in applicants over the same period. So we've gone from 72,000 the first year to 29,000 the second year. And the column on the right-hand side reflects the number of students at law schools. So this is very bad if you are in a law school. Every year, applicants are going down by about 20%. Still more trouble in Paradise. Well, this was actually something that was pointed out to me at a meeting with the Kyoto Bar Association a while ago, which is, gee, there's kind of more law students in Kyoto than there are lawyers. And Kyoto is sort of an education town, so there's more universities than you would usually have in a city of that size. But still, just the number of first-year slots in Kyoto law schools now is 500. If you add to that the people in their second and third year, you have a lot more law school students than lawyers. Why is this a problem? Well, you can train people academically however you want, but at the end of the day, a lawyer needs to have somebody teach them how to do things, what the judge is like, how this court works. So there's always an apprenticeship period that is a necessary part of becoming a lawyer. There's just not enough lawyers to train all these people, even if only 40% or 30% or 25% pass the bar exam. Real trouble in Paradise. Sorry, I don't know what happened to the yen mark here, but literally the average income of lawyers in Japan has gone down by a huge amount since this system was introduced. And I always like to bring this up. It's expensive to be a lawyer in Japan. $600, $700 a month in bar fees. So it's not something you can just do for fun. You have to have either somebody pay for that or have a reasonably established practice just to pay your bar fees, let alone your rent. Still more problems, and there's a lot of slides on the problems. The good schools quickly start to concentrate in primarily Tokyo. And one of the purposes for this reform was to get people out into the countryside, get lawyers out into the countryside. But what's happening is everything is focusing in Tokyo. Tokyo University, Hitotsubashi University, Keio University, all of the schools with the supposedly good schools, and the only criteria for evaluating law schools right now really is their bar exam pass rate. So if you have a high pass rate, you're a good school. They're all in Tokyo. Bar associations have almost immediately started calling for a reevaluation of this 3,000 per year target. The rationales are amusing. More competition will reduce the quality of legal services. And clearly, economics is not a bar exam subject, unlike every other good or service in the history of modern economics. More lawyers will need more immoral lawyers. I still don't get that one. Lawyers will take on, There's actually a logic to this because a big chunk of the lawyers in Japan have been very traditionally anti-establishment and will take on public interest works for ideological, they'll take on public interest cases for ideological reasons, but in order to do this, they need to have sort of a scarcity supplied source of stable revenue to support their sort of ideological hobby litigation. So they actually do have a reason for saying, well, if there's more lawyers, then there will be less public interest litigation because nobody will be able to afford to do it anymore. And these are just some of the samples. The Saitama Bar Association is calling for 1,000 lawyers a year. Other bar associations have called for 2,100 to 2,500 a year as being the target. We'll see. Law school education becomes excessively focused on bar exam subjects, i.e. What law schools were not supposed to do in the first place, because everything revolves around how high your pass rate is. More, cram schools prosper. One of the really depressing things about being in a law school in Japan is watching your students in the library taking cram school courses over the internet on the law school computers. And it results in this just utterly bizarre sort of compliance phenomenon where in order to sit for the bar exam, they need to graduate from law school, but they may actually be better served by skipping the law school classes and going to a cram school. So that means the law schools then have to become fascistic about attendance to make sure that the students don't go off to the cram school to prepare for the bar exam. It's just really bizarre. Companies, three strikers start to appear. You're only allowed to sit for the bar exam 3 times after you graduate from law school. So we're starting to get to the point where people have had their 3 strikes, and now by the time you strike out, you have just spent 5 or 6 years of your life doing something that you didn't succeed at. Many companies don't want law school graduates, even if they pass the bar exam. Companies were generally left out of the whole debate for much of the time I've listened to it. But they just want somebody to join out of a good university and be a corporate drone, and they don't want somebody to come in with some elite status, somebody that's going to expect to be paid more, somebody that they'll have to pay $600 a month for in bar fees. So even if you pass the bar exam, companies may not be interested in you. Fewer people passed the bar exam in 2009 than they did in 2008. Some people who do pass the bar can't get jobs. They're having to open up law firms right away. It's a very dismal situation for employment in Japan now in the legal sphere. Many law schools experienced accreditation problems in their initial startup period, so the government steps in. All law schools are encouraged by the ministry to reduce their class size. It's just, you hear about Japan as how Japan has deregulated, but then, when you sit in the room when the Ministry of Education calls and says, well, have you talked to your competitors about how much you're going to reduce your class size? You sort of wonder. The Central Education Committee on Law Schools, I won't go through all this, but there are a large number of sort of various government reports, government bodies involved in evaluating the law school problem. The Administrative Evaluation Bureau of Administrative and Internal Affairs and Communications Review is the panel that I sit on. And all of these panels, to some degree or another, and much of the press that has gone around this issue sort of talks about the poor quality of legal education and so forth. So this is the second narrative in my tale of 2 narratives, which that, well, there were too many law schools built. The original plan was to only have about 20. There were too many, so in the old system, there would have been a pass rate of 70 to 80%, which makes a whole lot of the debate irrelevant, because law schools under the old system would be doing exactly what they're doing now, and nobody would have a problem with it because the pass rate would be higher. What's interesting about the press, and even some of the debate about the quality of the law school, is that the low pass rate of the bar, the low bar pass rate that some law school, the graduates of some law schools have been experiencing is due to poor quality law school education. And this is also reflected in the generally poor quality of the new lawyers who have graduated from law school. Now, the problem with that debate, of course, is that it's impossible to evaluate the new lawyers because they haven't done anything. They haven't practiced long enough to be subject to evaluation. The whole notion of evaluating law school education and the new legal profession a few years after it started is simply nonsensical, and yet it is a process which is going on. So some of the problems that have been identified in a recent MOJ, Ministry of Education joint report, is a significant drop in law school applications, particularly from non-law graduates and from mid-career individuals. So these are some of the primary goals of the original system, was to get people who've studied something other than law into the system. Those people are being discouraged effectively by the competitiveness of the bar exam. 40 law schools, more than half of law schools this year, have applicant to slot ratios of less than 2 to 1. So if you apply, you can write your name on the form properly. There's law schools you can get into. So that comes to the competition for good applicants. Some law schools have low bar exam pass rates, others are not evaluating their students harshly enough. So part of the discussion about, well, why do some schools have low pass rates on the bar exams? Because they're being too easy. They're letting the kids graduate too easily. And some law schools are having trouble attracting high quality faculty, so that's part of the problem. Solutions, voluntary class size, voluntary. I actually sat in a room where somebody from the Ministry of Education actually said that Ministry of Education basically went and told all of the national universities that have law schools to just cut their class sizes by something like 20%. I actually sat in a room where somebody from the Ministry of Education said that was voluntary. So there's a number of proposals to improve the quality, ensure law schools have more appropriate faculty with appropriate age composition. If you look at most law school websites, the faculties are pretty much middle-aged men, often very old men. We started to talk about withdrawing funding or faculty support from underperforming law schools. These are some things that were proposed, which I hope which were hopefully rejected. Limit law school admission to undergraduate law grads, so or take away the whole people who don't know people who know something about subjects other than the law part of the program. Have a unified exam that all law students must pass while still in law school in order to graduate. It's nothing like having another standardized exam. Secure high-quality faculty by making your lectures available for external review on the internet. Would that encourage you to go to an institution? Yeah, all your lectures will be on the internet, meaning you'll have to listen to people comment on them. Have all three-year program students taught in their first year using the same text, possibly by highly accomplished professors over the internet. It's sort of what the cram schools are already doing, which is a little ironic. The real problems faced by Japanese law schools are very simple. It's the bar exam. The bar exam and the artificial supply on the number of legal professionals. The number of people who get to pass the bar exam is an artificial number set by the government. And I've actually, again, sat in the room where somebody from the Ministry of Justice was asked, is the bar exam a qualifying exam, i.e. an exam where everybody who gets above a certain score passes, or is it a selection exam where every year X number of people get to pass, and even if you do well, if you don't get into the X number, you don't pass. And he said it's a qualifying exam. The follow-up question was, so in theory, everybody who sat for it in a year could pass? And he answered yes, in theory. And then 15 minutes later, we were having this discussion about what the correct number of passers is. It was just fascinating. So the dropping pass rate that showed up in that other slide is a matter of simple math. Every year there are more people who graduated from law school and failed the previous year sitting for the exam. The number of people who get to pass is basically fixed. The fact that the bar exam pass rate went down, I think, simply reflects a response to the debate about poor quality. Well, how do we establish poor quality? Well, fewer people pass. The convoy method is something you used to hear about on the subject of Japanese economics, which was everybody does the same thing and arrives safely. The proposals are all the same. If everybody does the same thing, which is what's being proposed by the government, the results will be the same because everybody will still be competing for the same number of exam pass slots. Since a standardized exam is a principal part of the problem, these solutions that involve more standardized exams are actually kind of surreal. When we talk about quality and the problems with the curriculum and the low quality of the faculty, it ignores the fact that all of this was highly regulated in the first place. Law schools are not allowed to teach for the bar exam. We have to have 2/3 of our curriculum devoted to non-bar exam subjects. 1/3 of our faculties have to be practitioners, i.e. former judges or prosecutors or lawyers. And all law schools are subject to rigorous accrediting requirements. So this whole notion that there's something that the government should come in and fix, it just ignores the fact that the government is responsible for many of the problems in the first place. Faculty attrition, yes. I suspect that Professor Matsui hears from his former colleagues at Osaka University about how lucky he is not to have to deal with any law school classes, right? Most people don't want to be cram school instructors, which is what the law school system is requiring people to do. Dropping applications, anybody who looks at the success rate of going to law school is not going to go if they have other options. Your choice is on graduating from a reasonable law faculty, or go work for a good corporation, or sit for an exam that has a 25% pass rate and maybe no employment prospects. And what's really sad is what it's doing to the curriculum at law school, because anything you want to do to distinguish your program from other programs won't work, because it doesn't have anything to do with the bar exam. Do you want to teach legal writing so that people learn how to write client memos properly? No, you want to teach them how to write so they can pass the bar exam. Do you want to have legal clinics? Well, will it help students pass the bar exam? I actually sat in a very depressing conversation about clinical programs at another law school where the comment was something along the lines of, well, if that program, all they did was help refugees fill out applications for refugee status, didn't have anything to do with the bar exam. So what good could that possibly be? For me, trying to teach foreign law, the people are interested, but it's not on the bar exam. Why not make the bar exam easier to pass? Simple question. Well, the standard answer to this is the bar exam is the absolute minimum that you need to know to act as a legal professional. Well, I won't go through the slide, but if you actually look at the bar exam, things like family law are not tested. You can almost pass the bar exam without really knowing anything about family law, for example, whereas the number of family law cases brought every year in Japanese courts is huge. Every year there are two questions on negotiable instruments. Nobody in Japan uses negotiable instruments. There's only 700 negotiable instrument cases of litigation every year. But that's about the same number of cases of questions on the bar exam as there are on marital law, parent-child law. But the bar exam really isn't actually testing what I think most people would consider sort of the minimum standard for what you need to know as a lawyer, i.e., if you go to a bar association free legal clinic and answer questions. That's what I think is the minimum standard, but it's not what is tested on the bar exam. Well, okay, leaving all that aside, what's the problem with limiting the supply of legal professionals and ensuring that they have a high quality education? And that education is ensured at law school? Probably nothing is wrong with that, but what about this immigration law firm or this immigration lawyer? This is not somebody who has passed the bar exam. Nor is this person. He's an administrative procedures and contract specialist, but he has not passed the bar exam. He has not gone to law school. He has not gone to the Legal Research and Training Institute. There's a whole federation of Shoshi lawyers. What is she? They have an English website page. Here's the problems they'll help you solve. They sound like legal problems. Want to buy a home, want to set up a company, naturalize, my employer's not paying me, sounds like there's a dispute. These people have not passed the bar exam. Tax attorneys. Marine Procedure Commission agent. Azusa office, a Japanese specializing in labor law. There are actually, the Japan Patent Attorneys Association, actually looking at legal professions in Japan is actually almost like being a zoologist in a jungle, because you discover these new legal professions or new law-related qualifications. There are numerous other legal professions in Japan. Sometimes they're disparagingly referred to as paralegals. They act in areas often overlapping with attorneys. Just to quickly go through: social insurance and labor consultant, tax attorney, shihoshoshi lawyers. The numbers are not insignificant. Many of these professions have more in them than lawyers. There's a certain amount of double counting, because some of these professions, lawyers can also practice in these areas by registering. But they also have an exam. If you look at some of them, very difficult. I think actually the shihoshoshi lawyer exam may be one of the most difficult exams in the world, with a 2.8% pass rate. Administrative scriveners, patent attorneys, public notaries, And then if you look in government jobs, there are all sorts of judicial positions that are they're not judgeships, they're not prosecutorships, but they involve working in a prosecutor's office, working in a court system where there's an exam and you're performing legal functions every day. And then there's a huge number of people who work in corporate legal departments with no qualifications whatsoever. Where do these other professions fit in the debate over the legal profession and what law schools are doing in educating the legal profession? Absolutely nothing. It's just fascinating to sit in a room full of people discussing the legal needs of the Japanese people and passing the bar exam in law schools, and then get on a train going home that is plastered with advertisements from these other legal professions. If you get on a train, you will see that clearly Japanese lawyers are in competition with these other legal professions. Well, why? Part of it is elitism, I think. The lawyers and the judges have always viewed themselves as elites, I think. But if you look at these other legal professions, I think there's another factor at work, which is each one of them attaches to a ministry. Every single one of these other legal professions is basically a regulated industry, regulated by one of those ministries. Not only that, the exams all have exemptions for bureaucrats, usually from those ministries. So why would you talk about how many judicial scriveners there should be in the world when the judicial scrivener, the Doshisha lawyer, is effectively a retirement slot for certain types of people who work for the Ministry of Justice or prosecutor's agents. My favorite legal profession is the public notaries. If you read the public notary law, it says public notaries will be selected from people who pass the public notary exam. Lawyers, judges, and prosecutors don't have to take the exam. The exam hasn't been held for 100 years, and it's simply a safe, cushy retirement slot for former judges and former prosecutors. So why have these other professions not been discussed in the context of the law school? Because I think there's just too many interests at work to do so. You could not have this debate. The amount of sort of untruthfulness that goes on in the debate just when it involves the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Justice, the court system, and the Bar Association is so huge that if you added all of the other ministries that have legal professions, it would be completely untenable. So the conclusion, though, is that in the United States, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are lawyers working in legal jobs in all areas of society. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in Japan working in legal jobs in all areas of society. The difference is that the people in Japan don't have the same sort of portability in their qualification, and they are not subject to the same freedom as lawyers in the United States. Any lawyer in the United States can quit their job if they don't like what's going on, open up their own practice. Any lawyer in the United States is also subject to external sanctions for violating bar rules, which is not the case with these other legal professions. So although it's not really been framed as such, the debate over how many lawyers there should be is really a debate about how many people there should be in Japan who can sue the government or who can protect people from the government, because that really is the Japanese lawyer's principal monopoly, is the ability to represent people in court, including when charged with a crime versus trying to sue the government. On a certain level, the debate over law schools and the legal profession is really also about these entrenched interests and how they can be managed. It really has, in my opinion, very little to do with the actual needs of the Japanese people for legal service, because those are already being met in many cases. And I certainly participated in numerous fora where virtually everybody at the table is one of these vested interests of Ministry of Justice, Ministry of something. There has never been a representative of the Japanese people or users of legal services in any of those debates. Anyways, sorry to go over time. I'm happy to stay and answer questions if you want.